What's going on, everybody? It's been a while, and thank you. I decided to do a quick stream and a live stream, actually, really quick and really soon, because I wanted to just give my thoughts on a couple of things that have been going on in the gaming industry, and especially when it comes to the PlayStation Network. Now, if I'm a bit jittery in this video, I apologize. It's only because my computer's actually been glitching on me lately. I think my video card's ready to go, but computers have everything to do with today's discussion, and so does the PlayStation Network. So welcome. If you're new to this channel, please consider subscribing. A lot of people have actually recently watched my NBA Hang Time video that was released actually a few weeks ago, not too long ago. And I thank you to all the new subscribers for watching and for continuing to watch my content. So let's get right into what we're discussing today. And today is going to be really, what is Sony planning? Why are they shutting down PS3, PS4, PS3, PS Vita, and PSP stores? How does this hold any advantage towards them? Now, I've already discussed this topic previously in a different video, but I wanted to kind of expand upon what Sony is really planning and what they're doing and how this can potentially affect their whole franchise and their whole basically existence, because we all know that in the past Xbox has committed marketing errors in front of people that have had the gaming community turn on them, and then eventually the competing console wins the entire console war at the time. And it's happened to Sony before, if you think about it. Many years ago, when the PS3 was launched, and it was launched for $599, that price tag basically really hindered the success of PlayStation 3 for most of that console generation's lifespan, because of that high price tag and the really non-impressive games when it comes to that when compared to something like the Xbox 360 at the time. Most fans, especially those that had millions of people who bought the PlayStation 2, migrated over to Xbox 360 because the 360 itself was not only out for a year and had plenty of games, but was a lot more affordable than the unfortunate PS3 at the time. Granted, PS3 picked up steam much later in its lifespan, but that hindered it. That actually affected the PlayStation's ability to pick up steam. So then we go fast forward to the launch of the PlayStation 4. And when the PlayStation 4 was being launched, and it was launched roughly at a close time when compared to the Xbox 360, the Xbox One, excuse me. The PS4 had a very clever marketing campaign in response to Xbox One's marketing campaign, because they were going to do this new media management where someone could just install their disc and they'll have the game in the console and they don't have to really worry about it, and they just register it live and they can play it wherever they wanted. But you constantly had to be connected to the Xbox network, basically Xbox Live. So, and that caused a problem because you couldn't really resell games or trade them or lend them to a good friend of yours in that time period, because it just wasn't going to work out, because you had to, of course, register it with your Xbox Live account. So that was a problem. So PlayStation came back with an interesting response to that whole situation by simply being clever and saying, hey, this is how you trade games. And then they just showed somebody saying, here you go, and then just, sorry about that, and then just handing over their disc to their buddy or their best friend. And that in itself turned the tide and made it a good sell for people to actually buy PlayStation, because PlayStation was a lot simpler. And at least in the early on, when it was Xbox One and PS4, their early console releases, they were a lot it was a lot more powerful and it was less expensive. So price had a lot to do with it too. So Xbox had to respond by getting rid of their camera, the Kinect, off of the system, and basically saying, okay, we'll sell it to you without the Kinect and we'll drop the price just to compete with PlayStation. And PlayStation 4 was outselling Xbox One 2-1 at the time. So a lot happened, and a lot matters when it comes to how video game fans actually, perceive the product and perceive their loyalty to gamers. Now, PS5 and Xbox Series X have been a little bit difficult to get, but if you're lucky, you've been able to get your hands on one. But the most important thing that they've been trying to accomplish is let's ensure that we are about the games. I think they're both getting that marketing and that messaging right to say, hey, let's put out what really is next generation games. Let's make fans and audiences happy. Let's make sure that they're getting what they want. But then unfortunately, what you end up happening is that you especially if you think that you're the leader, you're ahead so much, and this is what's happening with Sony, you can start doing what you think is right or what you want in order to get more revenue. And you start to forget the gaming community that made you this popular, and then eventually it starts to hurt you. So to that respect, we're going to talk about the PlayStation Network itself and what's happening with the older generation consoles, the PlayStation 3, the PlayStation Vita, and the PSP, PlayStation Portable. So those consoles, if you don't know already, Sony announced that the digital online stores for those three older consoles are going to be terminated. Now, what that also means is that you will still be able to keep your existing games that you purchased and re-download them if necessary. However, you won't be able to access them or access the store to purchase new games going forward. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means that if you don't buy now, you won't be able to buy, I guess, without modifying your software somehow, new digital download games. Now, that's kind of sad for those older systems because you think, well, Sony is a company that has tons of games. There are thousands of games that you can download on the PlayStation 3 and the PS Vita and the PSP. So all those games you won't have access to, which means if they released physical media, that physical media that price of that physical media could go up, and you have no other way of getting those games apart from hacking and your console or whatnot. You have no way of getting those games and being able to play them if you want to purchase them later, because right now physical media is very hard to get when it comes to all of those consoles. So moving forward from that, I made a video not too long ago, like I mentioned earlier, that I actually prefer digital downloads when compared to physical media. And my reasons definitely had to be because of saving space, because of accessing those games frequently, easily, accessing those games and playing them right away. When I turn on my console, I could just pop in a game and then just play it and have a good time playing them. But with this recent announcement and this recent problem, it means that many years down the line, especially when these networks shut down, and we all expect that Sony will eventually say, okay, you can't re-download those games anymore after these dates. Then what happens? You'll have to download all your physical media. You'll have to download these digital purchases to your hard drive and keep them there. But what's also important is if your older consoles can't access the existing PlayStation Network, because that gets disconnected as well, will we be able to still play those games, or are we just not able to play those games at all? Now, a lot of these points too were brought up in a video that I saw earlier today by Adam Korlick. He premiered a video, so you should definitely check out Adam Korlick's channel. After I re-upload this, I'll put a link to his channel down below. But he brought up some very good points about the fact that when you have a server, especially like there used to be like SegaNet back on the Dreamcast days, or even before then, there was different online consoles that let you access the internet, but they won't always be accessible or playable going forward because they eventually shut down. So one would only assume that eventually you won't be able to go back to these games unless you have them downloaded. And even if you do, if it can't access the network, you lose. And it's not just a problem with PS3, it's also an issue with PS4 and PS5. Why? Because PS4 and PS5 have a different issue that was recently discovered, and this is all bad press for Sony. This issue basically is an issue of the CMOS battery, which is a battery, most consoles, at least today, that run operating systems and have clocks. The CMOS battery basically keeps your clock up to date for your console and keeps everything really matching the clocks on the network, especially the PlayStation network. Well, this clock was designed to basically if the system can't access the network, it just uses the clock and makes sure it uses the battery to make sure, okay, the clock is correct. But those eventually die out. And if your console can no longer access the network, you can for PlayStation. It's like, yes, we have temporary licenses to play games that we purchase through the network or even physical media as well. You're buying, sure, you're buying a physical game, but technically it's a license to play the game. So that's kind of caveat of it. You don't technically own that game. So they're allowed to do this, I guess. But the unfortunate thing is how we're also allowed to react to it. We might not like this. We might want to go to another console. Xbox, for example, can take all the advantage of this with their Xbox Live Game Pass, with the fact that their Xbox consoles, all of them, are backwards compatible with previous generations. So you don't even really have to keep the old consoles because they, for the most part, play most of their games on their newer versions of Xbox. And that in itself makes it a huge win for the Xbox category. And the reason that Xbox has been able to do this a lot easier, and this is kind of more of a technical aspect, the Xbox, the original Xbox, then through the 360, then Xbox One, and now Xbox Series X, all of those were built on an architecture that is very similar to PC. The processor, the graphics cards in those systems are very easy to program for. Very easy to program for. And they're similar architecture, granted more advanced with each generation. But what that allows is, because it's very similar to PC, it allows backwards compatibility with ease, without too much pressure and rewriting of code in order to get it to work. Sony, on the other hand, when they designed the PlayStation, the original PlayStation was pretty easy to program for. PlayStation 2, when that was released, had its own emotion engine, I believe. And that emotion engine was unfortunately hampered by the fact that it was somewhat a little bit more difficult to program for than the PlayStation 1. But because PlayStation 1 was so easy, you had a PS2 and PS1 in the original PlayStation 2. Then PS3 had its own engine, its own graphics, and it was notoriously horrible to program for and completely separate because Sony wanted to be the most advanced. And if you can program an engine it's really complicated, but you can get graphics that look absolutely amazing in next generation on this system, and we want to be ahead, then you have to make it really complicated and really affordable. Well, that in itself means also that you're going to have difficulty when it comes to programming that in a new console generation. That's why the original PS3 had the PS2 chip in it, and then it emulated PS1, because again, PS1 was easy. But it's because both of those architectures were totally different. You had to just put in a chip to be able to run with it. And that's why it was so difficult. So when PS4 came out, PS4 was like, okay, we can't be backwards compatible with anything, because PS3 and PS2 were way too unique, way too difficult to program for, and completely different architecture. PS4 was when PlayStation finally said, let's go with a similar PC architecture, because this will be easy to at least move forward multiple generations and make backwards compatibility a lot easier. That's why PS5 is compatible with PS4 games, or at least a lot of PS4 games, and enhancing them, because the built-in architecture is very simple, and it's pretty much like an you're getting a super upgraded PS4 and a PS5 with new architecture, but similar to PC, and makes it backwards compatible a lot easier. So yes, that's a problem. So moving on from there, why is it that we can still download our old games, and is that still possible? And why would they take away the store but let you download your old games? Well, from that, it's kind of a damage control thing. It's, okay, we'll let you download your old games, because if they didn't let you do that, you'd have even worse PR. Because then it's like you're taking away and you're stealing back all of those games that we paid good money for, and now we can't access. If PlayStation would have removed your ability to do that, then you would have been absolutely peeved. Because the ability to download the games that you've already purchased is basically what you feel you have the right to do, especially if you own those old consoles. But what's going to happen is, indirectly, you won't have access to those games going forward, especially when it comes to the time that the PS network can no longer connect to the PSP, PS Vita, and PS3. I mean, there could be, like, especially since you won't probably see any firmware updates, you're probably going to have some open bugs that exist on those older consoles that people can hack in, and they're going to want to close that security loophole. So eventually, it does make sense that they'll remove the ability to even download your old games. But they don't want to do that right now, because I believe that they have a plan. Now, I mentioned one of these plans in my previous video, which is rebranding of the PlayStation Store. The PlayStation Store's look has been in existence the way it is for far too long, over 7 years, I believe. And in order to upgrade the PlayStation Store's look, you're going to have to separate yourself from those older consoles. Only really the PS4 and the PS5 are going to be able to handle the layout and pretty much the UI of the new PlayStation Store. That is hopefully going to be a lot easier to use, a lot more visually compelling, and maybe graphically advanced when compared to that of the PS3 and what the PS3 can handle. Because the PS3, when you navigate to the PlayStation Store, it takes way too long to get in there, and it's way too slow for my comfort and for most people's comfort from the get-go. And that's how they want to pull themselves away. But there's a second plan that I believe that PlayStation will do with their whole, like, PSN Store anger that they're causing a bunch of their fans. And what that is, and this is fingers crossed, because if this is actually going to happen, this is something that I believe will be a good thing for the gaming industry. They can put up with people mad now, but that's eventually going to lead to a lot of happy people later. And hear me out, because this is a huge random guess. But I believe that they will have or give an ability for all of those PlayStation accounts and those network accounts that downloaded games for previous consoles. You will have access to those games, those network games, in the PlayStation 5 with a new kind of layout of how you can access your older games on PS5, and the onboard engine that they designed for backwards compatibility for PS3. Whether that be, now hear me out, I hope that it's not something like PlayStation Now, where you have to be online just to play those games, because that would be a disaster. No one wants to play their games and not have access to them on their old system, but on this new system you have to stream it. No, we don't want to do that. Not everyone has access to broadband that fast to be able to play it smoothly. But more of a custom special emulator that works only on PS5 to be able to play your PS2 games and your PS3 games, and potentially even your Vita games and your PSP games. Potentially. I doubt that the handheld consoles will actually move over to PS5. However, the PlayStation 3 games that matter so much will get their own I guess, free um, emulator. Now, this emulator, I do believe that Sony wants to take advantage and charge you somehow for it, like a creative way of charging you for those old PS3 games in order to enable this emulator. Whether this is $1 or $2 per game that you want to actually convert over or download access to it so that you get the upgraded version, or it's something like the emulator itself will be like a $60 or $70 purchase. Or even worse, but totally possible, a subscription to that emulator where you have access to that emulator, but you have to pay, you have to be, like, let's say, to use it, PlayStation Plus member. So as long as you have the PlayStation Plus, you can access this emulator to play your classic PS3 games natively on PS5. And that would be incredible, but yet controversial, because again, they're finding a way to charge you for those older games, but if they charge you for it, perhaps that'll give them motivation to, support that software, enhance that software, and potentially you'll get a lot more people signing on to PlayStation Plus because now it's better managed than Xboxes. Now, Xbox does a great job with how they do things. And actually, I will say that PS5 up conversion from PS4 to PS5 for a lot of those games is incredible too, with enhanced frame rate and all of that. So that's great. But the thing that you have to pay attention to is the fact that if they don't handle it right from a PR perspective, it can be a nightmare, especially if they charge you for each one of the games that you already own an additional fee just to emulate it. Then it's like, I already own this game and you're charging me even more. That's the wrong way to do it. But there is, if handled incorrectly, and if Xbox dives down this avenue as well, to where they stop supporting their older Xbox 360, let's say, and you can't get those games anymore, even though the way they've handled backwards compatibility has almost made it not matter because you've still got access to it on your latest Xbox consoles. But let's say they screwed up too, and you have PlayStation screwing up as well. There's one console, or not console, but gaming machine that takes advantage of this situation and could skyrocket. And that is the PC gaming world. The PC gaming world in itself is its own beast, right? There are games that are exclusive to PC that you really don't get the same experience anywhere else. From incredible graphics that, to this day, console makers can't compete with. We're talking 4K at 60 frames per second for very high graphical games that are just absolutely incredible, and just real experiences that an expensive machine can give you that console generations are only trying to continuously keep up with. But PC gaming industry was dominated mostly, at least in the early 2000s and in the mid 2000s, by DVDs, by discs, physical media. You can buy physical media in stores, and then you could just install the game in your hard drive and then play it. And that was happening way before consoles were doing that, because PCs, in a sense, had to do it based on their architecture. But then with the creation of, I guess, online purchases such as Steam and such as other competing, like the Uplay, right, or other competing online stores, but there are plenty of online stores that are available. Microsoft has its own online stores for PC. That avenue in itself has shifted towards the fact that PCs, if you buy one today, you'll find that PCs no longer even come with disk drives. It was standard for it to come with optical disk drives, and now I bought, I think, the last 2 or 3 laptops that I purchased, and my built-in PC, the case that I bought for it, doesn't even have a slot for a DVD drive at all. And I don't feel I miss it. If I want to get a DVD or Blu-ray drive, I could of course buy a USB connection and be good with that. But it's not needed, it's not standard, because a lot of their downloads are really, what you want to buy is a large hard drive to be able to download all your games to. And the management of these games through Steam, I'll use Steam as the example, have been absolutely incredible. That experience of downloading games through Steam, it's well organized, well managed. The store is laid out pretty cleanly. You could just search, grab the game that you want, and because it's PC, you have a keyboard and mouse, you get what you want. They work with controls, they work with VR, they work with everything. The experiences do get updated, but for the most part, you just have access to tons, hundreds of games. But as operating systems have upgraded, as video cards have upgraded, as these games have upgraded as well when it comes to graphical prowess, there has not been an issue at all with upgrading your system and then eventually getting to that portion where, you know, all of your equipment needs to get upgraded, so now your library won't work. No, you're able to play all of these older games. Now, granted, there are some games that were designed for older Windows consoles that probably don't work anymore, though there are tricks around it and compatibility modes on your computers just to get them to work. But the PC world and the PC industry doesn't have this cross-generational problem. They just have, boom, a game with higher graphics came out. If you want to play it, you're going to have to either put it in low graphics modes, or you're going to have to buy a new video card and upgrade your PC. So it's gradual, but you have access to games that you bought 10, 15 years ago. And that's the advantage that PC has. The industry was concerned at one point because they thought, okay, if you're in the PC, it's easy to hack these console. The DRM isn't always perfect with PC games, and then you have problems. But now, especially with a lot of online gaming and with a lot of different ways of purchasing your media and the handling of that media on Steam, for example, it's like, if you don't purchase your games, then what are you doing? Like, you could get viruses with illegally downloaded media. So it's not even worth it at this point. So that in itself is where PC can take advantage, especially because it does not have any of these issues. And yes, PCs can be more expensive, a lot more expensive than consoles. But what you get out of it is the ability to, as you upgrade your PC at your leisure, to never lose access to any of your old games. And that's why I believe that if Sony doesn't keep up and if Microsoft screws up, you're going to have a lot more people realizing that, hey, they had their best gaming machine all these years on PC. Now, Steam did try to launch their own little mini consoles and whatever just to get it to work on the TV, just to grow their library, but that wasn't too successful, unfortunately. Consoles still have a place, but at least when it comes to nostalgic purposes and keeping your library, for all of those who want to keep your physical media, hang on to it as much as possible, because going forward, the gaming industry is changing. It's not going to be that way, the way that you remember it. So, and as a final note, I will say that I do not regret at all purchasing all those games online on the PS4, on the PSN Store, whether it's PS3 or PS4. Though most of my PS3 games were physical media, but all of those games that I bought, I do not regret it. I still have access to download them. I don't regret being able to access them, and should they move forward, I think I'll find a way around it. I'm a bit of a technical guy to just find a way to download them anyway. But if you've watched this video later, let me know what you guys think about physical media versus this whole PlayStation Network debacle. Special thanks to Adam Korlick's earlier video. It was a great video, and I suggest that you guys check it out. And if you have any comments, definitely let me know. I'm broadcasting live right now, but I appreciate everyone who has an opinion. I appreciate all the new um, watchers of my channel that came about. Totally surprised me. But as always, thank you, and you can make my day if you subscribe today, if you haven't already. And this is Magnus, and I'm out. I'll see you next time. Take care.